Coming up on Bridge City News, the Canadian government has committed to millions of dollars worth of aid for Lebanon since a blast rocked the capital city of Beirut, killing more than 100 people. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation says the equalization payments Premier Kenney is demanding back from Ottawa should go to Alberta taxpayers and not provincial coffers. And the Premier of Nova Scotia is leaving politics. Stephen McNeil says it's time for a change.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The death toll from the explosion that rocked Beirut, Lebanon, has now risen to 135, along with more than 5,000 injuries. Government officials have originally blamed the blast on 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate stored in an unsecured warehouse. The government says it has launched an investigation to determine the exact cause of the explosion and who is responsible. International Development Minister Karina Gould says Canada will be committing $5 million in emergency aid to Lebanon. Gould says Canada is also concerned about the country's economic situation, which was fragile before the explosion destroyed Lebanon's biggest port.
1.5 million of this will be dispersed immediately through the Canadian Red Cross to the Lebanese Red Cross and other partners who are acting on the ground. Right now, the priority is to save lives. We know that in the next 48 hours, this is of utmost concern and how we need to act. Our assistance will also go towards providing emergency shelter, food and water assistance, as well as medicine and medical care. And we know that there is the emergency and the urgent response that's needed right now in Lebanon, but we also know that this is going to be a long-term reconstruction effort. And I want to assure Canadians, Lebanese Canadians, as well as the people of Lebanon, that Canada will continue to be there for the long term.
U.S. President Donald Trump has reconsidered that Beirut was attacked and now believes the devastating blast may in fact have been an accident.
At this moment, they're looking, it could, I mean, how can you say accident? Somebody was, left some terrible explosive type devices and things around, perhaps it was that, perhaps it was an attack. I don't think anybody can say right now. We're looking into it very strongly. Right now, it's, you have some people think it was an attack and you have some people that think it wasn't. In any event, it was a terrible event and a lot of people were killed and a tremendous number of people were badly wounded, injured, and we're standing with that country. You know, we have a very good relationship with that country, but it's a country under a lot of turmoil, a lot of problems, but we stand with them.
The blast in Lebanon has rocked many Lebanese communities across North America. Dina Salem of Los Angeles is making plans to fly to her hometown of Beirut to help with the cleanup efforts.
I was gutted, it was panic, and I basically for a moment didn't know what was going on, who was hurt, who wasn't. So it was complete panic at the moment, not knowing what's going on. We have family groups and they started sending these videos. And pictures of our home I saw of glass shattered and etc. with no text. So I panicked and I tried to call. I couldn't get through anyone. So I started texting and then they were like, we're okay. And family and friends that I spoke to have described this as louder than anything they've heard in the past, because we grew up in a civil war, me included. If someone gets out alive from the rubble, it's a miracle. Lots of blood drives. There's hospitals are over capacity, and they were already because of COVID-19, and now it's even worse.
Closer to home, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation says the equalization rebate Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is demanding from Ottawa should not go to the Alberta government, but instead to Alberta taxpayers. The increased equalization rebate can put anywhere from $540 up to $1,580 into the pocket of each Albertan. CTF Alberta Director Franco Terrazzano joins me now via Skype. Now, Franco, you say this money should go into taxpayers' pockets and not provincial coffers.
Well, Albertans are the ones who are paying the bills for federal spending and programs like equalization. So it's Albertans who should be receiving any equalization rebate, not the provincial government.
How many millions of dollars are we talking about here?
The Alberta government thinks that we should be getting a larger equalization rebate, about $2.4 billion. But some other researchers have suggested that we could get upwards of about $7 billion. So if we were to get either one of those larger equalization rebates, that would put hundreds of dollars back into the pockets of each Albertan. And that would really go a long way to help families and businesses and the struggling taxpayers here in this province cope with the economic downturn.
That was the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano. Now, the CTF says since 1961, Albertans have paid $661 billion more to Ottawa than we have received. The province of Alberta announced today that there were 56 new cases of COVID-19, along with 2 new deaths. Now, one of the deaths was at the Good Samaritan Care Facility in Edmonton. There have now been 205 coronavirus-related deaths in Alberta. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says 1 in 7 Albertans have now been tested for the virus. Hinshaw says the new numbers point to a more positive trend.
Today's case numbers continue a week-long trend of fewer than 100 new cases per day. I am cautiously optimistic that Albertans are taking health measures more seriously, including distancing, hand washing, and masking. Of course, we are not out of the woods yet. The spread of the virus over the coming weeks will depend on the choices we make this weekend and in the days and weeks ahead. The recent cases we have identified are not limited to any one region or age group in the province. While the bulk of new cases continue to be found in Calgary and Edmonton, rural areas have also seen a significant number of cases identified.
Many municipalities in southern Alberta, including Lethbridge, are not happy with Alberta Health Services. Mayors from Red Deer, Calgary, and Wood Buffalo joined Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman to express frustration with the new EMS 911 dispatch moving from city-led to AHS-run services. The move is expected to cut $6 million in costs, but the AHS says that saving money was not their intent for the move.
We need to have a fundamental understanding that there is concern. We understand that there is concern, but really what we're changing here is who is processing the EMS call. There's no change in the 911 system. There's no change in the software or the processes that are in place today. It will simply mean that an Alberta Health Services EMS, Emergency Communication Officer, will be now processing EMS calls.
Current 911 dispatch wait times in Lethbridge are roughly 60 seconds, which includes emergency response and transfer, while the AHS target is 30 seconds longer at 90 seconds. The executive director of the Lethbridge Food Bank is impressed with how well the community of Lethbridge has come together to show its support for the nonprofit group following a recent act of vandalism. Loris Alexander has the details.
I've had numerous emails, I've had numerous calls of people just saying that they're thinking about us.
A local home builder also offered their services to help in any way they could.
Stranville builders, they actually stopped by and showed their support, and they're working with us and seeing how they can help us through this event.
Lethbridge councillor Blaine Higgins started an online fundraiser that surpassed its initial goal of $2,000.
I do want to thank Councillor Blaine Higgins for starting this fundraising initiative, and for those who are participated, paid into the fundraiser, those who have come down here and showed their support and provided those funds.
Kiani Tari wants to extend an olive branch to the person responsible for breaking the windows.
People go through rough times, and forgiveness is huge, and to be able to move on from it and look at the positive of everything, and looking at how the community has been just so incredible, turning such situation into a really community building initiative and coming together and supporting us. It's been amazing.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
A local restaurant and pub appreciated a recent $10,000 grant from the Canadian Business Resilience Network. The owners of Honkers Pub say the money was welcomed as the business has struggled during the COVID-19 pandemic. Funds like these are really helping small businesses stay afloat during such uncertain times.
There was so many things pending on it, so I know $10,000 is a lot of money, but in the food industry type of thing, I mean, our rent is also quite high, as you know, when we've got a couple different bays. But we actually built a patio, and that we could actually put it out every day with the approval of the city and AGLC and all the great people on board. We were able to put that out so that we can actually show people we are open and we can have accommodations on the patio for families and even dogs.
A staggering 44% of adults suffer from at least one of 10 main chronic diseases in Canada. Recent studies say those who are impacted by these diseases are most likely to die from COVID-19. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly breaks down the numbers for Southern Alberta and which diseases are most prevalent.
According to the Government of Canada, the most common chronic disease is heart disease, and 25% of Canadians suffer from this condition. A recent study published by the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada found that countries like Canada, with more accessible healthcare services and more people living with heart and stroke conditions, the higher the COVID-19 death rate than countries with fewer accessible healthcare services. In fact, for every 1% increase in the size of a country's population with heart conditions or stroke, the death rate from COVID-19 was 19% higher. According to Alberta Health Services, in 2018 alone, the South Zone saw more than 20% of men and women of all ages diagnosed with a heart condition. AHS declined to comment to BCN. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Bikes of all styles and models will be showcased at a show and shine in Lethbridge. As Micah Quinn explains, this event is a great way to get out and explore the world of bikes and support a good cause in our community.
Bring your motorcycles because the first ever Show and Shine is set to take place on August 15th.
We are just a group of motorcycle enthusiasts that wanted to give back to the community, and we've been raising money via like barbecues and such throughout the last few years. And we decided to do a show and shine, and it's tied in with my shop, Full Throttle Cycles. And so for the last year, we've been working hard as a group. There's a whole bunch of us just setting up and getting ready to get the whole community together to show off all their pride and joys and just enjoy the day and try to raise as much money as we can.
There will be a ton of custom bikes to check out.
Anywhere from airbrush bikes, custom painted bikes, to custom built bikes, to choppers, to vintage.
A select choice of the proceeds for the Show and Shine will go towards the Full Throttle Foundation, which supports Woods Homes in Lethbridge.
The foundation revolves around a whole bunch of people that have had troubles in their past as well, and everyone knows what it's like to struggle. And so we've really found a way to connect with Woods Homes, as a lot of us have had issues when we were teenagers. So this is kind of our way of giving back.
The Show and Shine will be able to accommodate 100 to 150 people due to COVID-19 guidelines. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Western Hockey League announced today that the season is now scheduled to start on December 4th of this year. The league says it is committed to playing a full regular season schedule of 68 games, followed by 4 rounds of playoffs for the 2020-2021 season. The WHL, like many sports leagues, was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and pressured to either move, delay, or cancel their season altogether. Lethbridge Hurricanes General Manager Peter Anhold says the league seems to be mirroring much of what the NHL is doing.
The NHL playing and the success that they've had, you know, with their return to play protocols should help us in a lot of ways. And then it's just a matter of adding fans. And so hopefully that can be worked out in the months to come. Everything's on the table. Let's be really clear here. Everything is on the table for what the options are going forward. But I think ultimately we need to play in our own rinks, and we need our fans having the ability to come to our games, and so there's a lot of hoops yet to jump through.
Discussions remain to be held as to when Hurricanes training camp will begin. Jasper is the latest community in our province to pass a bylaw making face coverings mandatory in public areas. The resort town is requiring people to wear masks in all indoor public places, on downtown sidewalks, and in all outdoor public places where physical distancing is not possible. Mayor Richard Ireland says he's thrilled visitors are coming to Jasper, and the health and the safety of everyone in the community is a priority. The bylaw excludes kids under the age of 2, people with medical conditions, and those eating or drinking at restaurants. Meanwhile, here in Lethbridge, the city announced that beginning Friday, masks will also be mandatory indoors at all city-run facilities. BC Premier John Horgan says he understands parents, students, and teachers are anxious about the September school restart amid the pandemic. He says his government would not put kids at risk if the danger was overwhelming.
Well, I know that this is the biggest challenge that the education community has ever had. In 100 years, we've not had to experience going back to school in September during a global pandemic. And I know there's anxiety within the workforce, within the parent community, and even with some children. Of course, this is a very stressful time. But I'm confident that the steering group, which consists of administrators, vice principals, principals, teachers, support workers, parents, trustees, are all working to focus on making sure that we can get this right.
A report released by Public Health Ontario says reported COVID-19 deaths were inflated to assess the impact of potential underdetection of coronavirus deaths. The study says there was an inflation factor of 50% chosen, since on average, several European countries reported underdetections of 50% in an analysis conducted by the New York Times. The Government of Ontario says there have been so far just under 2,800 COVID-19 related deaths. Nationwide, there have been just under 9,000 deaths, including 203 here in Alberta. There are also 15,000 active cases of the novel coronavirus here in Canada. Nova Scotia's premier is leaving politics. Stephen McNeil says he stayed on longer than he had planned in order to lead his province through the first wave of the novel coronavirus. The Liberal premier says after 17 years in provincial politics, he needed to change, and he's ready for a rest.
I have informed the party to plan for a leadership campaign, which I expect will take months. I will stay on and continue to govern, and I will be here to work with public health to keep Nova Scotians safe until the next leader is chosen. I love this job. I've enjoyed every day of it. And every day I'm inspired by the people of this province. But this is not a lifelong career. I have always believed that governing is not about power, it is about purpose. And I want to thank Nova Scotians for giving me the opportunity to be your premier. I may not have always gotten it right, but here's what I know for sure. We are better together, and being kind matters.
McNeil was first elected in 2013, then re-elected in 2017. The union representing employees at a pork processing plant in Manitoba is calling for Maple Leaf to cease production after 3 more workers tested positive for COVID-19. The United Food and Commercial Workers Local 832 says it wants the company to stop work at the Brandon plant until August 10th at the earliest. It says time is needed to get test results for other employees. One worker at the plant tested positive last weekend, and the union says the 3 new cases are of non-production staff. Michael Swagstra is a teacher in Manitoba and an author as well. He recently wrote a book called The Naked Man Flees. Now, it's not what you're thinking. It's a book written about the 40 chapters of the Bible and how those chapters apply to our lives today. Swagstra says not only does the book touch Christian lives, but non-Christians as well.
One of the interviews I did was with a radio host who asked me a series of questions about the book. He had actually started his interview saying, "This is going to be interesting because I'm an atheist, and here I am talking about the Bible." And by the end of the interview, he had said, "You've convinced me. I'm going to get a copy of your book. Maybe I need to, as an atheist, start reading the Bible because there's some stuff in there that I need to become more familiar with."
Catch the entire interview with Michael Swagstra discussing his new book, The Naked Man Flees, coming up in the second half of our show. Environment Canada issued another heat warning for our region today. Good news if you don't have air conditioning, a slight cooling trend is on the way. Full weather details are on deck. Yet another heat wave for our region. Jeanette Roche is here now with a full look at the weather forecast.
Yeah, we could see a 40% chance of showers this evening with a risk of a thunderstorm. And you know what? The high scorching heat has been in effect for so long now that come tomorrow with that 23-degree high, it's going to feel chilly. And we're going to have some wind as well. We're going to see gusts up to 60, at times even 70 kilometers per hour. So a windy, sunny day. UV index still high tomorrow, though. And then our overnight low on Friday evening, 12 degrees. As we look further into the weekend, we're going to see lots of sunshine. 26 degrees for Saturday, 25 for Sunday, so should be a very lovely weekend. 29 expected for Monday with lots of sunshine. A mix of sun and cloud on Tuesday and Wednesday with highs of 27 and 25. So we're going to see it dip a little bit and then come back to the normal averages for this time of year, which is around 26. We should be hitting that this weekend. Average lows for this time of year, 11. The high temperature on this day was in 1983 there. 2006 was the low temperature. It was 4 degrees. 6:09 was our sunrise this morning and our evening sunset tonight at 9:05 p.m. So days getting a tiny bit shorter there. Over on the West Coast, let's look at our weather for tomorrow. A mix of sun and cloud for both Victoria and Vancouver. 19 the high over in Victoria. Vancouver's high 20 degrees. Temperatures cooling off significantly as well in Edmonton and Calgary. Chance of showers there as well. 18 the high in Edmonton, 20 in Calgary. Calgary could also see chance of thunderstorms. 5 millimeters of rain expected in both of those cities as well tomorrow. Saskatoon also could see a risk of thunderstorms, high 24. Same thing for Regina, high 28 there. 30 degrees is the high expected in Winnipeg tomorrow. They too could see a risk of some thunderstorms. Lots of sunshine though here over Ontario and Quebec. 27 is the high for Toronto and Ottawa. Montreal's high 28 degrees. Should be a lovely day in this area. As we look further into Atlantic Canada, mix of sun and cloud for Fredericton. 29 is the high. 29 also expected for Halifax with lots of sunshine, mix of sun and cloud in Charlottetown. 27 is the high. And a sunny day expected over in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow. 25 is the high there. So there you are, our weather.
Today's weather highlights are brought to you by Gym in the North, top-notch equipment and customized classes in Lethbridge's North End.
Restaurant Brands International says the pandemic-related restrictions caused a steep drop in second quarter sales at its two biggest brands, Tim Hortons and Burger King. It says sales retracted by 1/3 at Tim's and 1/4 Burger King. It says net income declined 37% to $163 million, as revenues fell 25% to $1.05 billion. It actually beat analysts' expectations for adjusted earnings, even though they plunged to 33 cents per share from 71 cents per share a year ago. The parent company, Bell Canada, says it is prepared to withstand the headwinds of the COVID-19 pandemic despite a 68.9% drop in second quarter profit. BCE says its net income to shareholders dropped to $237 million or 26 cents per share for the quarter. That is down from $761 million from a year earlier. Adjusted earnings fell 32.3% to 63 cents per share. BCE says its results were hit by the pandemic's impact on economic activity and customer demand, but it expects to show a marked improvement in the third quarter. Bombardier says its net loss surged to $223 million in the second quarter. That is more than 6 times higher than its loss a year ago. The Montreal-based company says the loss came as revenues plunged 37% to $2.7 billion due to pandemic-related disruptions. The adjusted loss was $631 million, or 30 cents per share. Analysts were anticipating a loss of 11 cents per share. Bombardier says early trends are encouraging from new interest in private air travel. Canadian children's entertainment company Spin Master lost $14.9 million US, or 15 cents per share in its second quarter ending June 30th. During the same period last year, the Toronto-based company earned $10.2 million US, or 10 cents per share. Revenue was $281 million US for the quarter. That is down from $321 million US from a year ago. The toy maker says strong demand for outdoor play equipment, plushies, and puzzles failed to offset declines in sales of Hatchimals and some Paw Patrol branded merchandise. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 77 points on the day to finish at 16,579. The Dow was up 185 points to 27,386. The S&P 500 was up 21 points to 3349, and the Nasdaq was up 109 points on the day to finish at 11,108. Oil was down 18 cents to 42.01 per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to 2.16. Gold was up a cent to $2,063.56 an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $28.92 an ounce. Wheat is at $220 per metric ton, barley's at $225, canola's at $4.90, and corn is at $224 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 48 cents to $106.98. Feeder cattle were down 60 cents to $145.88, and lean hogs were down 10 cents to 49.20. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to 75.18 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Canada is committing $5 million in emergency relief aid to Lebanon. The country's capital city of Beirut was rocked earlier this week by a blast that killed at least 135 people and injured more than 5,000. Government officials are still investigating as to what caused the explosion. A teacher and author in Manitoba has written a book called The Naked Man Flees. It's a book about the Bible and how it's become a good devotional for many Christians. Catch my interview with Michael Zwagstra coming up in just a moment. Michael Zwagstra is a public high school teacher and author. He has extensive experience teaching a wide variety of grade levels and currently teaches high school in Manitoba, high school social studies. He has a new book out called The Naked Man Flees, and it's not exactly what you're thinking. Michael joins me now via Skype from Steinbach, Manitoba. Welcome back to BCN, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Hal. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, you've previously written 2 books and articles on education policy. Why now have you decided to write a book about the Bible?
Well, the Bible has obviously been an area of interest of mine for a long time. And while I have written books on education policy, and that's what I'm well known for across the country commenting on, I'm also very passionate about the Bible. I believe that there's a lack of biblical literacy out there, not just among non-Christians, but frankly, even among many Christians, that we get a very superficial understanding where if you're relying just on popularized movies and maybe listening to some sermons and remembering what you learned in Sunday school, you're going to miss a whole lot of valuable information that's in the Bible and things that's worth learning. And so I decided it was time to write a book that pointed out some of these passages that commonly get overlooked and take a look at what they really mean.
Okay, we got to talk about this title, The Naked Man Flees. Makes a few people chuckle here. How did you come up with that name?
Well, the Naked Man Flees is also the title of one of the chapters, and it references a couple of verses in Mark chapter 14, verses 51 and 52. And that's the story of where Jesus has just been arrested by the guards, and he's about to be taken into custody. And it mentions that there was a young man who had been following behind, and the guards seized him, and he ran away, and he left his linen garment behind, and he ran away naked. And it's just this bizarre 2 verses. It appears only in the Gospel of Matthew, nowhere else in the Bible. We never see any direct reference to this man again. And a lot of people just miss that. They just go, well, what's this doing in here? And what I point out in my book is that actually there's a number of things we can learn from it. But one of the key things is, yeah, it's an odd event. It's the type of thing that you wouldn't expect a reference to a naked man running away to make it into a holy, sacred account regarding the arrest of the Son of God. But it is the type of thing you would expect to find in a real historical book describing what actually happened, and that the only reason for Mark to even put this in his gospel is because it happened. It's bizarre, it's strange, and it's yet powerful support for the veracity, for the truthfulness of the reporting that we find in the Gospels.
Michael, why is it that Christians and non-Christians alike tend to overlook certain parts of the Bible when they read it?
Well, there's a number of reasons, but the key thing is that our brains tend to go with what is most familiar. And so we get used to certain patterns, and we tend to look at things based on how we've commonly understood it. And so what that means is that we miss details that don't really fit with what we commonly understand. And the book starts where I show a little triangle, and I ask people, what does it say within it? And most people who read this triangle will think it says Paris in the spring, but it actually doesn't. There's actually an extra word in there, an extra the, that almost everyone misses because you're so used to seeing the phrase Paris in the spring, we miss that it actually says something a little extra. And it's similar when we look at our Bibles, that we know the story of Abraham and Moses and David, and it's so easy to miss the aspects of their character and their personalities that don't fit the popular narrative. And there's a lot of those things like that, and that's why Christians and non-Christians alike tend to miss these things when they're reading their Bibles.
Now let's talk a bit about Abraham. Your first chapter is titled "Abraham Shoos the Vultures Away." What are you discussing specifically in this chapter here?
Well, in Genesis chapter 15, God at one point is telling Abraham that he is going to inherit the land of Canaan. He's going to be the father of a great nation. And what happens is that Abraham then asks God, how can I know that this will be so? And instead of giving a straightforward answer, we see from verses 7 to 11, God telling Abraham to offer a sacrifice. And he has to bring a heifer, a goat, and a few other sacrificial animals. And then he has to cut them in half. And he then lays them on opposite sides from each other, and he walks in between them. And the passage then says in verse 11 that he shooed the vultures away until the evening. He actually kept the vultures from eating the carcasses. And then after that, we see the dialogue resume between God and Abraham. Now, again, because this is a famous chapter dealing with the great promise that God is giving to Abraham, we tend to gloss over this is a whole day that Abraham spent at this sacrifice. He not only had to bring these animals, he had to cut them in half. Think about the amount of gore and blood involved and how difficult it would have been for this old man to do this. And then he's walking in between them, and then he's keeping the vultures away. It's a powerful story of Abraham showing that his faith was real, that this following God's commands was so important that he was going to follow it exactly as God said. And he also knew, I can't just let the vultures come and eat the sacrifice that I've offered up to God. I have to protect them. And so he spent the day doing that. And it shows that that he followed up his faith with good works. Because, of course, as we know as Christians, good works come about as a result of our faith. And Abraham demonstrated it in that section.
Now, another interesting chapter is called God Almost Kills Moses. Tell me more about that one.
Well, in Exodus chapter 4, most people know the story of Moses encountering God at the burning bush and God telling him, you're going to be leading the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses is then on his way back to Egypt. And then we know that afterwards that Moses meets Pharaoh and makes the demand. But in between, while he's in the wilderness, there are 3 verses 24 to 26, where it says that on his way back, God met Moses and was going to kill him until his wife Zipporah took a flint knife and circumcised Moses' son right then and there. And as a result of that, God did not kill Moses. And we don't see that incident in the movie The 10 Commandments. You don't see it in Prince of Egypt, and you don't hear about it in a lot of sermons. But again, there's a lesson here. Moses didn't do something that was absolutely fundamental. He didn't circumcise his own son. There were a few things that were more disobedient among Jewish people at that time than to not circumcise their own son. And there was no way that Moses could lead the Israelites out of Egypt if that had been left unresolved. And so it's a reminder to us today that if you've been called into ministry, right, or to lead an organization, make sure you've taken care of the fundamentals first before you just go ahead and take that position. If you're going to be the leader of a pro-family lobby group, you better make sure your marriage is in good shape first. Take care of the fundamentals, just like Moses should have.
You know, it's funny, your book almost reminds me of a Cole's Notes version of the Bible. You know, the analysis and getting a little more in depth with it, and then maybe summarize it a little bit more. Now, your book, The Naked Man Flees, Michael, has 40 chapters, half about the Old Testament, the other half about the New Testament. I thought maybe you'd focus a little more on the New Covenant.
Yeah, I did this deliberately. I chose to, and of course, 40 is the number of completion too, so there's that biblical reference. So it's a complete book. But I chose to go half and half because I want to make it clear that the Old Testament and the New Testament are equally important. Christians, it's tempting to skip the Old Testament and just go straight to the New Testament. And I understand why. The New Testament makes things more explicit and direct. But the Old Testament is where you find the foundations. It's the Old Testament that Paul is speaking about in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, when he says that all Scripture is inspired by God. And so you can't really fully understand the New Testament if you don't read the Old Testament. And so I wanted to make sure in this book that I gave equal attention to both the Old and New Testament because they're both important for Christians today.
Now, do you believe that the stories you talk about in your book actually happened, or are they simply symbolic of a deeper spiritual meaning?
I believe the stories actually happened. Throughout the book, I take a high view of Scripture. So I believe that the incidents that have happened in regards to Abraham and Moses and all of the others, I believe they occurred as actually described within the Bible. Obviously, we have to read the Bible according to the genre that the different books are written in. I recognize that. But in the historical narrative where it's describing things that happened, whether it was the miracles that Jesus did, or the events described in the Old Testament. I believe the appropriate thing to do as Christians is to take the Bible at its word. And so I do believe the stories happened as described.
So what benefit would Christians really receive from reading your book?
Well, I think Christians would hopefully gain a deeper appreciation for the Bible. And it's, it's really easy sometimes to come to the idea that, I've kind of been there, done that. I'm pretty familiar with the Bible already. And we get bored in our Bible reading, in our devotions. And so this book is intended to shake people up a little bit and to make them notice, whoa, there's some parts of the Bible that I might have missed before. And I wonder how many other parts of the Bible I've been missing. Maybe I need to read the Bible a bit more carefully. Maybe I shouldn't just stick to the well-worn, one verse a day devotional guide, which tends to pick the easy verses with the obvious application. Maybe I should get back to reading the Bible itself and not skip over chapters that I think are difficult. And so I really hope that my book inspires people to take more time reading the Bible itself.
Now, you've also done media interviews about your book on secular radio stations. Why would non-Christians be interested in your book?
Yeah, I have done a number of interviews on some pretty major secular radio stations where the majority audience is non-Christian, and each of the hosts that interviewed me was definitely non-Christian. But I believe that non-Christians should read the Bible too, because obviously as a Christian, I want them to read it because I hope it brings them to faith in Jesus. But even before that, just to have a better understanding of our history and our culture, it makes sense to read the Bible and have some understanding of it. And one of the interviews I did was with a radio host who asked me a series of questions about the book. He had actually started his interview saying, "This is going to be interesting because I'm an atheist, and here I am talking about the Bible." And by the end of the interview, he had said, "You've convinced me. I'm going to get a copy of your book. Maybe I need to, as an atheist, start reading the Bible because there's some stuff in there that I need to become more familiar with." And so, if it could be a witness and to get more people to look at the Bible and not just have it sit on their shelves, then that's what I'm hoping happens.
Hey, did you follow up to see if this person gave their life to Christ?
Well, the interview was only last week, and so I don't think that it's going to happen quite that quickly. But I certainly would hope that does happen, and I do hope to be able to talk to him again. I am on that show on a fairly regular basis talking about education issues, and so I do want to look for opportunities to ask the question.
And you know what? At the end of the day, the seed has been planted, so that's wonderful. Now, some would say, "Hey, Michael Swagster, you're not a pastor. Why should I buy into this?" Do you have any theological training?
You're right. I'm not a pastor, and most of my obviously experience and training in education is in the field of education, including a master's degree in educational administration. But I also have a Master of Arts in Theological Studies from Liberty University, and I completed that degree about 4 years ago. And so I do have some academic training in the area of theology. And obviously, I have my personal reading that I've done over the years and teaching. But I do have a master's degree in theological studies, and on a part-time basis, I do teach at Steinbeck Bible College as an adjunct professor, where I've taught courses on history and theology and ethics, and so I do believe I have some reasonable credentials in this area.
Now, where can people actually pick up a copy of your book, Michael?
Well, the simplest way to get it, because it's just out, would be to go to Amazon. If you go to Amazon.ca and you type in "The Naked Man Flees," it'll pop up pretty quickly. Either that or type in my name and it'll come up pretty quickly there. And I do expect to start getting into some bookstores in the not too distant future. But obviously right now, with everything being slowed down by COVID, the fastest way at this point, if you want to get a copy of the book, is just go to Amazon and type in the name of the book, "The Naked Man Flees," and it'll pop up pretty fast.
Could "The Naked Man Flees" be used as a private devotional or maybe in a Sunday school class? I bet you kids will probably get a kick out of that title.
Yeah, I believe it could. And the chapters are short. There's 40 chapters, and each chapter is about 1,200 to 1,500 words, and so it could be used as a devotional. In fact, one of the people I had involved in editing the book turned it into that as he was doing his editing. He said that as he would edit one chapter a day, and he said, "I just made it my devotional." And so that's where I sort of thought that, well, I wonder if maybe others could do that too. But it could also be a great book to use in Sunday school, both at the high school level and in an adult class. I think there could be some great discussion from it. I've taught adult Sunday school for many years, and these are the types of topics I can assure you that get people interested in discussions. And Sunday school is a great opportunity to do that. And I think this book could be a good resource for Sunday school classes.
Does your book try to settle long-standing theological scores such as Calvinism, the age of the earth, or infant versus adult baptism?
No, that is not the purpose of the book. I take an approach somewhat similar to C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity approach. I guess in this case, I sort of go with mere evangelical Christianity because it is an explicitly evangelical book. It is in that regard. But I'm very clear in the book that I'm not getting into the mode and the time of baptism as part of the debate or the proper interpretation of Revelation. Those are important issues, and I think it's worthwhile for Christians to look into them and explore them. And I've got views on all of those, as do most Christians. But that's not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to get people into the Bible and to get them thinking for themselves. And I'm not interested in settling theological scores. This is scores. This is not going to be the book that resolves all those issues.
Teacher and author of the book The Naked Man Flees, Michael Zwagstra. Thanks for joining me today from Steinbach, Manitoba.
Well, thanks very much, Hal. It's been a pleasure.
The world has changed with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. The response to this has really varied from country to country, but it seems the most common response is a high degree of anxiety and worry. Joining me now to talk about it in studio is Graham Bretherick, a registered psychologist, president of Run Free Ministries in Lethbridge, also author of The Fear Shift, Dominated by Fear No More, available at runfreecounseling.com. Graham, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you for inviting me, Hal. Good to be here.
You bet. Now let's talk about COVID-19. A lot of people are impacted by this around the world. Here in Lethbridge, I mean, we have some cases here as well. When was the last time you saw the level of anxiety and fear so high?
Well, I don't think I've ever seen it so high as this. I mean, I'm just a little over 70, and I don't know that I've ever seen it in all of the things we've been through. I mean, I wasn't around when World War I and World War II were, obviously, but I have not seen it this high in a long time, maybe ever.
That's incredible. Yeah. Now, what is the difference between fear and simply really being concerned about something?
Well, no, let me step back. Fear actually has two sides to it. There's positive side of fear, and it's basically a good thing. Without fear, you'd get killed walking across the highway. Without fear, you could get, all kinds of problems. So we need fear to warn us. So fear basically works as a warning signal. However, the fear of fear, which is what I see going on now, I call negative fear. That fear is quite different because we get overwhelmed by the fear.
Okay, how about anxiety?
Well, anxiety is just repressed fear. So if you keep pushing the fear, I don't want to think about it, you push it down, that's what anxiety is.
Some people say maybe the media is paying a little too much attention to COVID-19. But at the same time, the world is taking notice. Right. Thousands of people dying in Italy, not just in China. It's rampant around the world right now, so we want to be concerned. But is there a point in time when we're going beyond staying informed and maybe pushing negativity?
Yeah, let me just say this. The positive fear is really faith. All right, that if you look at what it is, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So we need wisdom. That's really an expression of faith. But if you think about what negative fear is, it's really be controlled by the fear of fear. So it depends what you focus on. So I just say this, that faith really has to do with focus. What are you focused on? So if you focus on the television, you focus on all the bad reports and constantly get that, and that's all you're getting, you're going to be fearful and you're going to be overwhelmed by it and you're going to become quite anxious.
With Bridge City News, we also like to include some good stories. Absolutely. When it comes to COVID-19, like there are different volunteer groups in Canada and the United States, they're helping even Holocaust survivors who are shut in their homes and making meals and bringing them meals. So it's nice to see the good things that humanity is doing at the same time, right? And that's pretty important, isn't it?
It is. Well, you think back to some of the Jewish people who held people in their homes at the danger of their lives. And so why did they do it? Because they believed it was the right thing to do. They had a faith and believed in it was the right thing to do. But they took their lives in their hands in one sense, because if they got caught, they were dead. So I love the fear that turns into a positive thing, and we do good things because we're not afraid of being overwhelmed by what's happening around us.
Some people like to get their news sources as well from social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so forth. Can we spend maybe too much time on social media that may impact our own psyche?
Well, I think we can. Yeah, and again, it's focus. What are you focused on? So if all you read is all the negative stuff, then that starts to overwhelm you. Your emotional system can't actually handle that. You need to put a focus on some good things, some positive things.
Some structure.
Yes.
You know, it's funny because a lot of times we give our kids a certain amount of hours that they could spend maybe on their computers or on social media. Maybe we should do the same for ourselves, discipline ourselves, right?
Well, I watch the news because I want to be alert. I want to keep.
You're watching Bridge City News to see what's going on.
I am watching the news. I watch Bridge City News.
That's right. That's awesome.
So, but I'm also reading my Bible, and I'm also declaring Psalm 91 over my family and over my every day when my wife and I share communion together and we pray together, we read Psalm 91 over us and make that as a declaration. So I'm not living in the fear that I'm going to get COVID-19.
I think it's natural to get scared. A lot of us get scared
Yeah.
for whatever happens, right?
Fear's natural.
So fear will come, but how can we really shift that fear into faith? That trusting God will provide and protect and watch over us?
Just what I've said is that if you don't worship the God who's over all of this, see, worship is a real help that way. And so is reading our Bibles, so is meditating, so is talking with other Christians who have enough faith. So I've been encouraging people in their faith. All right, so that's what I keep doing because what are we focused on again? I come back to it. What are we focused on?
A lot of people are concerned as well with COVID-19, the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus,
Sure.
that it's going to impact a lot of those who already have compromised immune systems,
Right.
such as our parents and our grandparents. How do we put some of those fears at ease? Because we're really worried about the elderly.
Right. Well, and I think that's the positive side of fear. Be alert. Be smart. You know, be aware that if you're in your 80s, you're going to be more vulnerable than if you're in your 40s or 30s, et cetera. But that focus is a good focus because then we're being smart. Like I think it's good to be careful with how much we're connecting with people. That's smart. But I'm not going to be afraid to go out in public because that would then control me. My fear then controls me. And I don't want that to happen. I want my faith to control me.
Graham, what do you say to people who've lost their jobs because of COVID-19? My daughter's one of them. She was working as a line cook in Ontario. Her restaurant shut down. A lot of people are fearful they're going to lose their jobs. And how are they going to pay their bills? Their rent, their food, or mortgage payments?
Well, again, let me take you back to if God is my provider, and therefore He's going to make provision in these difficult times. I understand the fear. I understand we have to be alert to, and understand that when we lose our job, we have to start thinking about what we're going to do. But at the same time, I've been through times when we haven't had much money. And so what did I do? Did I get fearful? Sometimes yes. Or did I go back and say, wait a minute now, who's my provider? Am I my own provider or is God my provider? And that's what carried me through. And I shifted my faith again and said, Father, you are my provider. I'm trusting you through this.
You know, sometimes people sit down, and I'm guilty of this myself sometimes. You get on your knees and you pray to your Heavenly Father. He'll provide and protect, and you'll leave it at the foot of the cross.
Right.
Then you get right back up and you take those worries right back from God, right?
Yes, I know.
So how do you get into practice of just leaving those problems at the cross?
Well, I mean, because I think we need constant reminders. We're slow learners, all right? So just constant reminders. Every day, that's what I say, my wife and I are choosing to have communion every day as the focus on the cross. That's what we're doing. And we're just simply saying, you're our protector, you're our provider, you're our peace, and we're going to operate in that. And we need that reminder because it's easy to shift back, whoops, everything else is very frightful out here. So I'm just keeping my focus here. I'm not unaware, I'm not naive about this, but I'm keeping my focus here.
A lot of people as well, Graham, are quite concerned about, you know, the consequences of the anxiousness, you know, maybe being sleepless,
right?
You know, maybe getting stressed out to the point that you have an ulcer perhaps.
Right.
So physiologically speaking, how can you control the anxiousness to the point where you don't make yourself sick?
Well, I think what we probably have to do is talk about it. Like anxiety usually happens because we push it down and we keep it quiet and we don't talk to anybody. It is much better to talk about, but we're ashamed of our anxiety. We are ashamed of our fear focus. And so we just keep it quiet. And then what happens is it's turmoil inside of us. It's much better to sit down with someone and say, look, I'm afraid. All right, let's talk about it. Let's work it through. Let's pray it through. Let me help you change the focus, which is what we're doing in counseling. We're helping people shift the focus.
How about shift the focus onto something else, like working on a vehicle, doing some gardening, perhaps? Springtime now?
It's a bit premature for gardening.
Well,
but when we come to it,
right?
that's true. I think
Like
that's
hobbies,
good.
right?
Yes. I think that's a good thing to do, as long as that's not an escapism. You know, like I say, here's what I sense. People are way more full of fear than they realize. And so they push it down, and then something like this comes along, and all of a sudden, whoop, all this stuff comes to the surface. So what I want to do then is learn how to walk this out and work this through so that I actually gain mental health or emotional health through this process.
Do you think as well maybe COVID-19 is a good test of our own faith?
It is.
And our relationship
It
with
is.
God?
I'm saying these days, how real is your faith? Does it work for you, or is it religious? In other words, it works on a Sunday morning. I go and I do my Sunday morning thing, and I come back, and then the next day on Monday, I'm back to living in worry and fear. By the way, if you're worrying, you're not trusting. If you're anxious, you're not trusting. Those are good signals. If I'm anxious, if I'm worrying, I'm not trusting. I'm not trusting God. So then I can confess that. That's one of the things I'm saying to people. Then just confess it. I'm worried, which means I'm not trusting. I repent. That is, I change my thinking from worrying, I'm going to solve my own problems, to being able to say, I trust you, Father. You are my provider. You're my protector. You're my peace.
How important is it then to really meditate on His Word?
Very important. I do it every day because I can't.
Does that give you that peace that you need then, right?
It does. It does for me. And I realize that sometimes when I'm dealing with counseling and people are quite anxious, I have to keep myself focused back for their sake and my sake on what I really believe. What do I really believe? So I'm reading the Bible with that in mind. Psalm 91, again, I just read that before. That's a really good one. But the other day I was reading in Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2 in my Bible reading, and Nehemiah has to go before the king. If he says the wrong things, off with his head. So he approaches this with prayer, and then he puts action to his prayer, and then tells the king what's going on. Basically, the king says, why are you so down? Why is your face sad? Now, you're not allowed to be in the king's presence and have a sad face, apparently, in those days. But he did it, took a risk, and then God gave an option to be able to tell the king what was going on. His heart was heavy for Jerusalem, etc. But that he faced his fears.
As human beings, do you think we have a tendency to put more faith in our consequences rather than in trusting in God?
Oh, yes.
In that relationship?
Oh, yeah. It's the natural thing is to get focused on the world that I live in and the environment I live in. That's
and woe is me sometimes, a pity party, right?
Yeah, and pity really is a form of pride. You know, that self-pity is a form of pride. So if I'm focused on myself, I'm not walking in humility. And humility basically is saying, I trust you, Father. I trust you to take care of me during these times. These are actually not bad times. From my point of view, they're actually, I'm not being naive when I say that. There's lots going on. But it's great opportunity in the kingdom of God to advance the kingdom of God and say to people, where's your faith? Let me help you with it. Let me come alongside you.
How important is it then, Graham, to really focus on things we should be thankful for?
I like that. I think that's really good because otherwise you get into a negativity. So look, I've got this to be thankful, this, and you put it helps change the focus, helps change where you
count your blessings, right?
Name them one by one. That's right, the old hymn says, yeah. So it's good, we should be doing that. And we should be encouraging one another along the line, you know, because I know people, I talked to someone the other day who was really quite fearful. And I just said, let me just put a little different shift. And as I did, in about 15 minutes, that person has shifted from a fear focus to a faith focus.
How can we really help our children deal with anxiety?
Talk about it. Worst thing you can do is just be anxious. They pick it up. They sense that. So I just say, talk to your children. Open it up. Are you worried about something? Are you concerned about this? It depends on the age of the child. But I say, what are you worried about? Let's talk about it. That's one of the ways we shift from letting it control us because we push it down. Because often, again, we feel ashamed, which is hiding. We feel ashamed of our fear. I shouldn't be afraid. I shouldn't be afraid. But fear is a natural emotion. But I just not get caught in it. I don't want to get trapped by it.
I know a lot of times as well as a man, I can be fearful of a situation that I have no control over.
Right.
You know, because a lot of men, it's like we want to be able to control certain things and help our families the best we can. We want to problem solve, get it right in there. But sometimes you can't. And that's what's really difficult. And that can create more anxiousness.
Right.
Right?
Well, we like to stay in control. All of us do. I'm no different than anyone else. I like to stay in control. But I have to realize, basically, I worship a God who's controlling everything. The coronavirus has not caught God off guard. He's not shocked by it. Now, he didn't create it. but he's not caught off guard by it. So then I go back to God. All right, how do I handle in this time? How do I walk this out with faith? How do I become a positive influence instead of a negative influence?
Some people would ask as well, Graham, perhaps non-believers, why would God, your God, allow something like this to happen, to take so many innocent lives? COVID-19.
Well, yeah, it's not like he allows it to happen. It's the result of a sinful world we live in, and all the fear and all the anxiety and all the greed and all the stuff that's going on around us. I mean, that's a result of a fallen world. But God always says, I can turn all things from evil into good. So, that's what Romans 8:28, basically, we go back to that. God causes all things to work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And that's my faith stand. I keep my focus on Jesus.
So Graham, some closing thoughts on a message you want to deliver to seniors who are watching, families who are watching, who are impacted by COVID-19 and are concerned about the novel coronavirus.
Right, well, I'm a senior, right, and have been for quite a number of years, so I understand that. But I would say to seniors, if you become worried and anxious, use that as the first signal, I'm not trusting. I'm not really trusting God. My faith has to work for me. If it's not real, what is it really? It's religion. And I'm not into religion. I'm into reality.
A relationship.
A relationship with Jesus Christ. And if it doesn't work for me, why am I doing it?
Graham Bretherick, registered psychologist, president of Run Free Ministries in Lethbridge, and author of The Fear Shift, Dominated by Fear No More. Thanks a lot for joining me today in studio.
You're welcome, Hal. It's a joy and a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.